All right, for this exercise, we're going to use one of these four different frameworks to help us sort of brainstorm and imagine and think about what the implications might be for the use of virtual reality in our own classrooms through our teaching and or our student learning. So I chose these four different frameworks. There's probably an infinite number of ways to think about future implications of something, but I just chose these four because they in my mind, help make sense of what the future could possibly hold. So we're just going to walk through each one very quickly, and then I'll set you off to get to work. So the first one you may have heard of is called a SWOT. It stands for Strengths, Weaknesses, Opportunities, and Threats. And this particular framework typically is used in businesses when they're trying to either strategize for 5 years out, or they're bringing a new product on board, or thinking of bringing a new product on board, and they're trying to assess how they stand amongst the competition. But we can use it as well to think about how we could use VR in teaching and learning. And again, whenever you're looking at one of these frameworks, think of it in terms of how might we behave or react or respond to a particular tool. And in this case, again, it's going to be virtual reality. So I'm not going to read this slide to you. You can read it yourself and decide if this is a framework that you would like to use. And what you need to do at the end of any of these frameworks is just sort of synthesize your findings into a brief statement, one, two, or three sentences that reflects what I'm going to call a grand vision of virtual reality for teaching and learning. And you're going to post that to the Poplet, and I'll show you that in a second. But let's look at framework number two. This framework is a way to consider from the historical perspective how something evolved and how our human behaviors evolved along with it. So in this case, I just used as an example two-way communication tools. And so if you think of in the past, the telegraph, that was really used to send urgent messages or just timely updates. And our behavior wasn't so important, right? Because it was just merely conveying words. So there was really no presence involved. Presently, we use the telephone, and we can use it as an alternative for face-to-face conversations. And our presence, that is our emotions, how we're thinking or feeling, is communicated through words, and we certainly can communicate our presence because we can evoke emotions in the way we sound and the emotions that we communicate. And in thinking of the future, I imagine that the holograph would be sort of the next form of two-way communication. And I imagine that it could be used beyond just communicating our voice and beyond just communicating our emotions, but maybe even transmitting our senses. And so that's just a way, again, this framework is a way to use the past and think about how we have evolved and are stepping further and further into a new behavior. The third framework is what I call the if this then that. And there's actually a website where you can type if this then that, and you plug in your details and it comes up with an answer for you. It's kind of fun to use. But in this framework, what you're doing is you're just kind of almost like an algorithm. You're thinking of how the pieces of VR, if VR is XYZ, it will mean this, and it will lead to XYZ, which ultimately means etc. So again, this is just sort of an algorithmic way to think about the implications of virtual reality. And then finally, the last framework we can use is thinking of virtual reality on a continuum. And what are the behaviors in terms of from the dystopian perspective to the utopian? And what you're going to do if you decide to use this framework is on one end, you'll think about the dystopian effects, the conditions, and the potential environment and resulting behaviors. And on the other end, you will use the opposite. You will think of a more utopian aspect. What are the conditions and the environment, and what might the resulting behaviors be from the use of virtual reality? And in this case, what you're going to do is you can decide how you want to represent your findings. But typically, what you might do is sort of reach an agreement between dystopian and utopian viewpoint and come up with sort of a midway perspective that combines both ideas into one, and maybe something that is what we might call more realistic or more possible. All right, now what I want to show you is the Poplet. And what you're going to do is you'll need to register if you don't already have a Poplet username. You'll need to do that. It's a free application. Many of you are probably already familiar with it. And when you go to our VR implications, you're going to see the 4 different frameworks. And all you'll need to do to post your brief statement is, for example, if you were using the dystopian or utopian, you just click on the little bubble, and to add your own comment or statement, you just add another bubble, and you can begin typing right there. So that's the first step. And then within a day or two, you'll need to go back and pick somebody else's statement and reflect on that and make a comment. And that's really all there is to it. And this exercise, again, I want you to really remember there's no right or wrong answer. This is merely a way for us to just sort of expand our thinking of today and think about the future implications of virtual reality in maybe 5, 10, 15, or 20 years from now. And you can choose any timeline that you wish. I hope you enjoy this activity, and I really look forward to seeing some very imaginative statements.